The spiritually awake don't announce their transformation, they live it. You can see it in their silence, in their absence from noise, in the way they move differently now. Awakening doesn't make people louder. It makes them sharper, calmer, and far more selective. As awareness expands, the awakened begin to quietly eliminate everything that no longer aligns with their higher frequency. They stop explaining themselves. They stop forcing connections. They stop chasing validation. What once fascinated them now feels heavy, hollow, or irrelevant. It's not bitterness, it's evolution. Awakening reveals what's real, and what's real doesn't need to be loud. Their energy becomes sacred space, protected, refined, and guarded. The spiritually awake don't fight the old. They simply stop feeding it. They detach from what drains them, and in doing so, they reclaim their power. In this video, we'll explore 5 things spiritually awake people quietly eliminate. Not out of pride, but out of peace. Subscribe to join the Guru Clan, a brotherhood of awakened souls mastering truth, clarity, and self-mastery. 1. They eliminate energy that pretends to care. One of the first things spiritually awakened people let go of is fake love disguised as loyalty. They begin to see the truth behind people's intentions, the subtle manipulation, the conditional affection, the dependency masked as care. What once felt like friendship or family now feels heavy, draining, and false. The awakened stop mistaking attachment for connection. They no longer tolerate energy that disguises control as concern. Those who constantly project their fears, drama, or expectations onto them slowly fade from their life. Not because the awakened have become cold, but because they've become clear. They now recognize that some people stay close not to support you, but to keep you small, to feed on your attention, your energy, your light. Awakening sharpens perception. You start to feel when someone's care is genuine and when it's transactional. You sense when their interest depends on your compliance, your availability, or your struggle. Once that awareness awakens, it's impossible to unsee. The spiritually awake understand that real love liberates, not limits. Genuine energy flows freely. It doesn't guilt, demand, or control. So they begin to distance themselves quietly. No confrontation, no chaos, just silence and absence. The energy vampires can't survive where awareness grows. This elimination isn't fueled by anger. It's born of peace. The awakened no longer need to prove their loyalty to those who don't reciprocate it. They stop chasing connections that drain them and start protecting their frequency. Their boundaries are not walls, they are filters. And once that clarity settles in, the shift becomes permanent. The awakened learn that you don't lose people when you set boundaries. You lose those who were never aligned with your growth in the first place. This is why the spiritually awake move differently. They don't react, they release. They don't argue, they detach. They understand that not all love is pure, and not all loyalty is sacred. So they eliminate energy that only pretends to care, because pretending is the opposite of truth. And truth is the only energy they now allow to stay. 2. They eliminate the need to prove themselves. One of the most liberating stages of spiritual awakening is realizing you no longer owe anyone an explanation for who you are. The awakened stop chasing validation, stop debating their truth, and stop trying to be understood by those who are committed to misunderstanding them. They no longer explain their worth, they embody it in silence. Before awakening, life revolves around proving intelligence, loyalty, goodness, or success. Every action is driven by the need for acknowledgement. But once consciousness expands, that need dissolves. The awakened recognize that external validation is a trap, a system designed to keep people performing for approval that never lasts. When awareness deepens, they begin to see the futility in arguing with blindness. Explaining yourself to the unaware is like trying to describe the sky to someone who refuses to look up. So they stop. They stop justifying their peace. They stop explaining their silence. They stop apologizing for their growth. They understand that real power requires no announcement. This shift doesn't make them arrogant. It makes them free. The awakened are no longer enslaved by opinions. Praise and criticism carry the same weight. None. They act from alignment, not validation. Their confidence doesn't come from recognition. It comes from clarity. When you no longer need to prove yourself, your energy becomes untouchable. The awakened move differently, grounded, composed, unbothered. They let their presence speak louder than any defense ever could. Their silence unnerves the insecure because it removes the fuel that ego thrives on. Reaction. This kind of self-assurance isn't loud, it's magnetic. People feel it. They can't explain why, but they respect it. The awakened embody a frequency that says, I am enough, with or without your approval. That vibration commands attention without seeking it. The spiritually awake understand this truth. Validation is the currency of the unawakened. When you know who you are, you no longer need to spend it. You simply exist in truth, and truth validates itself. They have nothing to prove, because they finally remember their existence is the proof. 3. They eliminate distractions that numb the soul. When the spiritually awakened begin to see clearly, one of the first things they purge is distraction. They recognize how much of modern life is designed to numb rather than nourish. The noise, the scrolling, the constant dopamine hits. All of it keeps the mind busy, but the soul asleep. The awakened start to withdraw from that noise. They lose interest in shallow entertainment, meaningless trends, and endless debates. They realize that most of what people consume isn't information, it's anesthesia. It dulls awareness, quiets intuition, and replaces purpose with stimulation. The awakened crave silence because silence is where truth begins to speak again. Their evenings grow quieter. Their mornings become sacred. They spend more time in solitude, not as isolation, but as calibration. Without the constant buzz of distraction, they can finally hear their own thoughts, feel their emotions, and reconnect to their intuition. The world calls it boring, but the awakened know its peace. They begin to choose depth over distraction. Instead of scrolling for validation, they create. Instead of consuming noise, they listen to life, to nature, to stillness. They replace reaction with reflection. They stop chasing constant stimulation because they've remembered that real power is cultivated in stillness, not motion. And with every layer of distraction they shed, their awareness sharpens. Patterns become visible. Truths emerge. They start seeing how much of society is built on keeping people too distracted to question, too entertained to awaken, too overstimulated to evolve. The awakened refuse to play that game anymore. This elimination is not about judgment, it's about energy. Every scroll, every argument, every meaningless indulgence costs attention, and attention is sacred currency. The awakened spend it wisely. They choose what nourishes the soul over what numbs it. They understand that focus is freedom. In a world addicted to distraction, stillness becomes rebellion. Silence becomes power. The awakened don't withdraw because they're antisocial. They withdraw because they are no longer willing to trade awareness for noise. In solitude, they find clarity. In discipline, they find strength. In silence, they rediscover the voice of the divine. That is why the awakened eliminate distraction, not to escape the world, but to remember who they were before the world distracted them. 4. They eliminate the fear of being alone. For most people, being alone feels like a punishment. Silence feels empty, space feels cold, and solitude feels like rejection. But for the spiritually awakened, being alone becomes something sacred, a return to source, a reconnection with truth. They learn that separation from the crowd isn't isolation, it's elevation. Before awakening, people chase constant company to escape themselves. They fill silence with conversation, loneliness with attention, and stillness with distraction. But once consciousness expands, the awakened begin to see how most social noise only pulls them away from their center. They no longer seek presence for comfort. They seek it for alignment. Their solitude isn't absence, it's refinement. Alone, they process what the world tries to suppress. They meet their shadow, their doubts, and their higher self in the same space. In solitude, they stop pretending and start healing. Every layer of external identity begins to peel away until only truth remains. They realize that being surrounded by people who don't understand your spirit is far lonelier than standing alone in peace. The awakened stop forcing connections that drain them and start protecting their energy with quiet reverence. They begin to enjoy their own company, the stillness, the clarity, the simplicity of existing without noise. This solitude doesn't make them detached. It makes them grounded. They become observers instead of reactors, guided instead of influenced. The world still moves around them, but they no longer need to chase it. They are content being in rhythm with something deeper, the flow of divine timing, the pulse of inner truth. What once felt like emptiness now feels expansive. Alone time becomes meditation, prayer, and self-discovery all at once. The awakened use it to sharpen intuition, strengthen discipline, and cleanse their energy. They no longer fear solitude because they've realized it's where the soul remembers who it is. People may call it withdrawal, but in reality it's ascension. The awakened are not hiding. They are evolving. They've outgrown environments that suffocate their awareness. They've learned that true companionship begins within. When you're at peace alone, every connection you form is from choice, not need. The awakened no longer beg to be included, understood, or accepted. They no longer confuse proximity with belonging. In solitude, they find everything the crowd could never give them: stillness, authenticity, and divine connection. That's why the awakened eliminate the fear of being alone. Because once you realize that solitude is your sanctuary, you'll never mistake the noise of the crowd for peace again. 5. They eliminate the illusion of control. One of the final and most liberating awakenings comes when a person realizes how little control they ever truly had, and how much peace exists in surrender. The spiritually awakened no longer grip life with anxiety or force outcomes into existence. They stop fighting the current and instead learn to flow with it. What once felt like loss of control now feels like divine alignment. Before awakening, most people live in resistance. They plan obsessively, cling to timelines, and panic when life doesn't go their way. The ego believes control equals safety, but in truth, control is fear in disguise. Fear of uncertainty, fear of failure, fear of trust. The awakened see through that illusion. They begin to understand that life unfolds according to divine timing, not human impatience. When they surrender, their energy shifts from tension to trust. Instead of forcing doors open, they wait for the ones meant for them to unlock naturally. They start recognizing patterns and synchronicities as signs from the universe, not coincidences. Their intuition becomes their compass, guiding them through what logic cannot explain. This surrender isn't passive, it's powerful. It doesn't mean doing nothing. It means acting in alignment. The awakened still move forward, but from flow, not fear. They make decisions with inner guidance, not desperation. They understand that every delay carries purpose, and every detour conceals direction. By releasing control, they reclaim peace. The anxiety that once ruled their mind dissolves. They no longer chase, argue, or worry. They respond with patience, knowing that what's meant for them cannot miss them, and what misses them was never meant to stay. This way of living confuses the unawakened. They mistake surrender for weakness, but it's actually mastery. It takes immense strength to trust invisible forces, to let go when every instinct screams to hold on. The awakened trust because they've seen enough evidence. Every moment of pain, every closed door, every setback was simply the universe rerouting them toward truth. Letting go of control doesn't make them detached. It makes them receptive. It opens the flow of life to move through them rather than around them. They no longer resist change, they anticipate it. They no longer demand understanding, they allow revelation. Spiritual awakening isn't about gaining more. It's about releasing what was never real. The awakened don't evolve by addition, but by elimination. They strip away everything that clouds their clarity. Fake energy, the need to prove themselves, shallow distractions, fear of solitude, and the illusion of control. What remains is truth, simple, quiet, and powerful. This elimination process isn't cruelty. It's purification. Each thing they let go of makes space for something higher. Peace, awareness, and divine flow. The awakened realize that the more they release, the lighter they become. Life begins to move effortlessly. They stop forcing, and life starts aligning. They stop chasing, and everything meant for them begins to arrive naturally. Those who haven't awakened see this transformation as detachment or arrogance, but it's neither. It's self-mastery. The spiritually awake are not running from the world. They're simply refusing to carry what no longer belongs to their path. They've learned that silence can be strength, solitude can be sacred, and surrender can be power. When you eliminate what's false, what's true no longer has to shout to be heard. Subscribe to join the Guru Clan, a brotherhood of awakened souls mastering truth, clarity, and self-mastery. Comment below, what's something you've quietly eliminated on your awakening journey? Your awareness might be the light someone else needs. Because in the end, awakening isn't about becoming more. It's about becoming real. And the real you doesn't chase, prove, or control. The real you simply is,